I never thought I'd see the day when my own family would turn my love for them into something to laugh at. That night, as my mother's hand connected with my face and the sound echoed through the hall, I didn't feel anger, just clarity. My brother's clapping cut through the silence like a knife. In that moment, I realized everything I'd been pretending not to see for years was real. My name is Mia Thompson, and I was raised to be the peacekeeper. I was the one who smoothed things over, who apologized first, who stayed quiet to keep everyone happy. My mother, Evelyn, always had a soft spot for my brother, Chase. He was her pride and joy, the perfect son who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was the emotional one, the too sensitive daughter who was always told to toughen up. I tried to believe it didn't matter. I tried to believe love didn't need to be equal, that maybe I was just the kind of person who gave more than she got back. But that illusion started to fall apart the night of my mother's 60th birthday party. I had spent weeks planning it. Every detail, from the silver table runners to the floral arrangements, was chosen with care. I wanted it to be special, something she'd remember forever. The guests were her friends, business partners, old church members, around 100 people in total. Everyone was dressed beautifully, and the room sparkled with laughter and clinking glasses. When my mother took the microphone to thank everyone, I waited for her to say something about the work I'd put in. Instead, she went on about how wonderful Chase was, how successful, how much he'd done for her. She didn't mention me once. People looked at me with awkward smiles, as if waiting for her to correct herself, but she didn't. Trying to ease the tension, I made a small joke. Well, at least now we know who the favorite is. It was meant lightly. The crowd laughed, but my mother's expression froze. She stepped closer, eyes cold, and hissed, "How dare you embarrass me?" Before I could say another word, her hand came up and struck my cheek. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. Then I heard the gasp from the crowd, the murmur of voices, and the sharp sound of my brother clapping. He stood there smirking, saying, "Finally, someone said what we were all thinking." People looked away, unsure of what to do. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stood there, feeling every piece of affection I had for them crumble into dust. Then, without a word, I turned and walked out of the room. As I stepped into the cold night air, I knew one thing for certain. My family had humiliated me for the last time. Something inside me had changed, and I wasn't going to let them break me again. Growing up, I always knew my brother Chase was the favorite. It wasn't something anyone said out loud, but it was in everything my mother did. When Chase broke something, it was called an accident. When I made a mistake, it was carelessness. If he needed help, Mom dropped everything. If I asked for the same, she sighed and told me I needed to be independent. When we were kids, Chase got away with things that would have gotten me grounded for weeks. If he stayed out late, Mom said he was just being social. If I did the same, she called me irresponsible. She would beam when Chase brought home a report card with B's, but when I brought home A's, she said, "You could have done better." It didn't matter how hard I tried. In her eyes, he was always brighter, smarter, more deserving. Things only got worse as we got older. When college came around, my parents paid for Chase to attend a private university across the country. They called it an investment in his future. When it was my turn, Mom said they didn't have enough money left and that I should apply for scholarships. I worked 2 part-time jobs and took out loans to make it through. I didn't resent Chase back then. I told myself it wasn't his fault. I just wanted to make my mother proud, even if it meant doing it the hard way. After college, I built my own path. I became an event planner and worked long hours to grow my business. I sent my mom little gifts when I could, helped her decorate for holidays, and made sure she never spent her birthdays alone. I thought maybe one day she'd see that I wasn't trying to compete. I just wanted to be loved equally. But Mom had a way of turning even my kindness into something to criticize. If I sent her a thoughtful gift, she'd say, "You shouldn't waste money like this." If I missed a family dinner because of work, she'd accuse me of thinking I'm too good for them now. And when Chase bought her something small, she would show it off like it was gold. Every visit home was the same. Mom and Chase sitting together, laughing about something, while I sat there trying to join in. If I mentioned something about my job, Chase would cut me off with a joke, and Mom would laugh at his side comments. I told myself to let it go. Families aren't perfect, right? But deep down, I knew it wasn't just teasing. It was years of being dismissed, ignored, and quietly pushed aside. I never wanted money or praise, only respect. I wanted my mom to see me, to acknowledge that I'd built a life on my own without asking her for a single thing. But that night at her birthday party, standing in that crowded room, I realized respect was the one thing she'd never be willing to give. The night of my mother's birthday party started beautifully. The country club shimmered with warm lights. The tables were covered in soft gold linens, and every flower arrangement matched perfectly with the theme I had chosen. I wanted everything to be flawless for her. She had always cared about appearances, about how people saw our family, and I thought giving her a night like this would finally make her proud of me. I had handled everything, the booking, the catering, even the band. My mother didn't know it, but I had paid most of the expenses myself. I told the staff to send the invoices to my email so she wouldn't see them. I wanted it to be my gift, something from the heart. The guests began arriving around 7. They were her friends from church, old co-workers, and a few neighbors she liked to impress. Chase, of course, showed up late but was greeted like a celebrity. Mom's eyes lit up when she saw him. She hugged him tightly, fussed over his suit, and completely ignored the fact that I had been there since noon making sure everything ran smoothly. The evening went on nicely for a while. People laughed, took pictures, and complimented the decorations. Some even came up to me to say how beautiful everything looked, and for a few short moments, I felt proud. Maybe this time things would be different. Then the speeches started. My mother walked up to the stage, glowing with happiness. I stood near the back, smiling, waiting to hear her say something that might make all those hours of effort feel worth it. She began by thanking everyone for coming. Then she turned toward Chase and said, "I couldn't have asked for a better son. He's always been there for me, always supportive, always making me proud." The crowd applauded. She smiled at him lovingly, then moved on to thank her guests one by one. But she never said my name. Not once. The applause faded, and I stood there frozen, hoping maybe she had just forgotten and would remember at the end. She didn't. When she finished, she looked completely pleased, while I felt invisible. The silence inside me was heavy. I wanted to disappear, but instead, I tried to save the moment. When she returned to her table, I smiled and said playfully, "Well, I guess now everyone knows who did the decorations." It was lighthearted, a small joke to ease the tension. Some guests laughed politely, but my mother's face changed instantly. Her smile vanished and her eyes turned sharp. She stood up, walked over to me, and whispered harshly, "Why would you embarrass me like that?" I tried to explain it was just a joke, but before I could finish, she raised her hand and slapped me. The sound was so loud it echoed through the room. Everyone went quiet. For a second, all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Then I heard Chase's laugh. He started clapping, mocking, and saying, "Finally, someone said what we were all thinking." People looked shocked, whispering to each other, unsure what to do. I stood there frozen, the side of my face burning, my chest tight. I wanted to speak, but nothing came out. My mother turned away as if nothing had happened, and Chase just grinned. The air felt thick, and I realized the room that I had decorated with love was now filled with shame. I didn't wait for anyone to say anything. I just turned, walked out through the doors, and stepped into the cold night air. Behind me, I could still hear the faint sound of music starting again, as if the world had moved on without me. For a few seconds after the slap, everything stopped. The music, the laughter, the chatter, all of it disappeared. I stood there frozen, my cheek burning, my hands shaking. I could hear only one thing, Chase's slow, sarcastic clapping. His smirk stretched wider as he said loudly, "Guess you finally got what you deserve." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some people whispered, others looked away, pretending not to see what had just happened. My mother didn't look back at me. She turned and walked off the stage, as if I was nothing more than an inconvenience she wanted to forget. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. My Aunt Clara rushed over, trying to take my hand, whispering, "Honey, it's okay, she didn't mean it." But her voice trembled. She knew there was no excuse for what had just happened. I gently pulled my hand away. I couldn't bear to be touched. Not out of anger, just emptiness. I looked around the room at faces I had grown up seeing. People who had watched me grow, who had come to our house for holidays, who knew I had planned this entire night. None of them said a word. A few looked sympathetic, but no one stepped forward. No one defended me. Chase took a sip of his drink, still smirking, acting as if he had just watched a show put on for his amusement. "You shouldn't have made her mad," he said with a chuckle. "You know how Mom gets." His words were cold and casual, but they hit harder than the slap itself. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of him. I turned toward the exit, each step heavier than the last. My heels clicked softly against the floor, the only sound in the room. I didn't look back. As I walked out, the air outside felt like freedom. The night was cool, quiet, and empty, a sharp contrast to the noise and judgment I had just escaped. I stood by my car for a long moment, trying to steady my breathing. My reflection in the window showed red eyes and a faint mark across my cheek. I barely recognized myself. When I finally sat in the driver's seat, the silence was deafening. My hands gripped the steering wheel, and I let the tears come, not out of weakness, but because something inside me had finally broken free. All the years of trying, of hoping for her approval, of pretending the favoritism didn't hurt, it all ended in that one moment. As I drove home, the lights of the city blurred through my tears. My phone buzzed once, a message from my aunt asking if I was okay. But I didn't reply. I didn't want comfort. I wanted peace. And for the first time, I knew exactly what I needed to do to get it. They thought they could humiliate me and walk away untouched. But they were wrong. That night didn't destroy me. It woke me up. As the highway stretched out before me, one thought played over and over in my mind. If they wanted to break me, they just gave me the perfect reason to fight back. The morning after the party, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. My cheek was still sore, but the real pain was deeper, the kind that sits in your heart and doesn't let go. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. Every word, every look, every time my mother had chosen chase over me. Last night wasn't just a bad moment. It was years of disrespect coming to the surface. I made coffee, though I could barely taste it. My phone was full of messages, most from people who had been at the party pretending to check in, but really just wanting details. I ignored them all. I didn't want pity or gossip. I wanted answers. As I sat at my kitchen table, one thought came back to me, something from years ago, after my father passed away. He had always been fair, the kind of man who believed in doing what's right. Before he died, he told me he had set up a trust fund for both Chase and me. After his funeral, when I asked my mother about it, she said the market had crashed and there was nothing left. I believed her. I was too young and too lost in grief to question it. But now, after what she'd done, that memory came back with a new kind of clarity. My mother had lied about so many things. Maybe this was one of them. Without overthinking it, I picked up my phone and called Uncle Martin, my dad's older brother. He had been close to my father and served as the executor of the estate. When he answered, his voice was warm but cautious. "Mia, it's been a while. Are you all right?" I hesitated for a second before speaking. "Not really," I said softly. "Something happened last night. I think it's time we talked about Dad's estate." There was a pause on the other end. Then he sighed. "I was wondering when you'd ask about that," he said quietly. "I've had questions myself for years." I told him everything, about the party, about how Mom humiliated me, about Chase clapping while everyone watched. My voice shook, but Uncle Martin listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. Finally, he said, "Mia, your father's trust fund wasn't supposed to disappear. He was careful with his finances. He made sure both of you were secure. If your mother told you it was gone, that's something we need to verify." Hearing that sent a chill down my spine. "You think she took it?" I asked quietly. "I don't know," he said, his tone firm. "But I can find out. I still have access to the old estate files. If something doesn't add up, we'll know soon enough." For the first time since the party, I felt a small spark of hope. Not the kind that comes from wishing things will get better, but the kind that comes from deciding to take control. Before we hung up, Uncle Martin said something that stuck with me. "Your father always said the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how long it's been buried." When I ended the call, I sat in silence, staring out the window. My mother had spent years making me feel small, powerless, and unworthy. But now, for the first time, I had something she didn't expect, the will to fight back quietly, smartly, and on my own terms. One phone call had started something she wouldn't see coming. A few days after the call, Uncle Martin phoned me back. His tone was serious, different from before. He asked if I could meet him at his office. The way he said it made my stomach twist. I drove there that same afternoon, my hands gripping the steering wheel the whole way. When I arrived, Martin had a stack of papers spread out across his desk. He didn't waste time. "Mia," he said quietly, "I found something, and it's bad." I sat down, trying to steady my breathing as he handed me the first set of documents. They were copies of financial statements from my father's trust, the one I was told didn't exist anymore. My name was right there, listed as a beneficiary, but next to it, in bold letters, it said inactive. I frowned. What does that mean? He looked me straight in the eye. It means someone filed paperwork declaring you no longer eligible to receive your share. And whoever did this used your social security number to make it look official. My heart dropped. I scanned through the pages, forged signatures, fake notary stamps, withdrawal slips. And every transaction led to one account. My mother's joint account with Chase. Over the years, they had taken out nearly $450,000 from the trust. Money my father had set aside for my future. I sat there in silence, staring at the numbers. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. The betrayal hit me harder than that slap at the party. That had been public humiliation. But this was something colder, more deliberate. They hadn't just lied to me. They had stolen from me for years, using my own identity to do it. Martin pushed another document toward me. A copy of the forged signature they'd used to mark me as inactive. It was supposed to be mine. I looked at it and shook my head. That's not even close to my handwriting. I know, he said. I've already had it compared. It's clearly forged. And this isn't an accident, it's fraud. I leaned back in the chair, feeling a wave of numbness. So all those years, they just let me struggle, knowing I had this money? Martin nodded slowly. Your father's intention was for both of you to be secure. Evelyn and Chase took advantage of your trust. They made sure you never questioned it. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to hold back tears. Why would my own mother do this? Martin's voice was calm but heavy. Because she thought you'd never fight back. She counted on you staying quiet. That line stayed in my head long after I left his office. I drove home in silence, the folder of documents on the passenger seat beside me. Every page was a reminder of how far their greed had gone. When I got home, I spread the papers out on my dining table. My hands were shaking, but I started organizing them, dates, signatures, bank accounts. I wasn't doing it out of anger. I was doing it because I finally understood that letting this go would mean accepting the way they treated me forever. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, about reclaiming what was mine and proving that no matter how quietly I had lived, I wasn't invisible. By the time I finished sorting everything, I felt a strange calm. The kind that comes when you've been hurt so deeply that fear doesn't control you anymore. They had taken my trust, my dignity, and my silence. But they had also handed me the evidence I needed to end their control over me, for good. A few days later, I decided to face them. I didn't call ahead, and I didn't warn anyone. I just drove to my mother's house with a folder full of documents in the passenger seat. My hands trembled a little on the steering wheel, but inside I felt calm. It wasn't anger guiding me anymore. It was truth. When I walked through the front door, the smell of coffee filled the air. My mother was sitting at the dining table, flipping through a magazine, and Chase was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. They looked up when they saw me. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. Well, she said sharply, I was wondering how long it would take you to come to your senses. I assume you're here to apologize for the scene you caused at my party. I didn't answer. I set the folder down on the table and took a seat across from her. Chase chuckled under his breath. Wow, you're really going for the dramatic entrance, huh? He said. I opened the folder slowly and began laying out the papers one by one, bank statements, trust records, and notarized documents. Actually, I said quietly, I'm here to talk about Dad's trust. My mother's hand froze mid-turn of the magazine. What are you talking about? The one you said was gone, I replied. The one you and Chase have been taking money from for years. For the first time in my life, my mother didn't have a quick response. Her face shifted, confusion, then irritation, then something like fear. Chase sat up straighter. What kind of nonsense is this? He said. I slid one document toward him. A record showing multiple transfers into his personal account. This nonsense, I said. Evelyn reached for the papers, her voice rising. You have no idea what you're talking about. Those are private family matters. No, I said, my tone steady. They're legal matters. And I've already talked to people who know exactly what's going on. She glared at me. Who? Uncle Martin, I said. He's the one who found the forged documents. And I also spoke with the family accountant. They both confirmed everything. The color drained from her face. Chase stood up quickly, his voice sharp. You're lying. You're just trying to make us look bad. I reached into my purse, took out my phone, and pressed play. Uncle Martin's voice filled the room, calm, clear, and firm. He explained every detail, the forged signatures, the withdrawals, the fake notary stamps. He ended with the words, "There's no question. Evelyn and Chase used her identity to access her inheritance." When the message ended, the silence was thick. My mother's hands were gripping the edge of the table. Chase looked pale, his earlier smugness gone. I stood up slowly. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to let you know that this ends now. The lawyer has copies of everything. You'll be hearing from him soon." Evelyn's voice cracked for the first time. "You wouldn't dare. We're family." I met her eyes. "You stopped being family the moment you stole from me." Chase muttered something under his breath, but it didn't matter. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder, and walked toward the door. Before I stepped outside, I turned back once. My mother sat frozen in her chair, her perfect posture gone, her face pale. Chase looked lost, for once not knowing what to say. It wasn't the shouting match I'd imagined. It was quieter, heavier. The kind of silence that comes when the truth leaves no room to hide. I didn't need to raise my voice. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Evelyn stared at me, her mouth slightly open, trying to piece together a defense. Chase shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my eyes. I could see it in their faces, the shock, the fear, the realization that their secret was finally exposed. For years, they had treated me like I was small, helpless, easy to manipulate. But not anymore. I looked straight at them and said quietly, "You took everything that was meant for me. But I'm done being your victim." My voice didn't shake. It came out calm, steady, almost too calm. Evelyn's face twisted in anger. "You ungrateful girl," she spat. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" I almost laughed. "What you've done for me?" I said. "You mean the lies? The years of pretending there was nothing left from Dad's trust while you and Chase spent my share." She slammed her hand on the table. "Watch your tone, Mia. I can still cut you off from what's left of this family." That made me smile, not out of humor but out of exhaustion. "There's nothing left to cut off," I said softly. "You already stole it." The words hung in the air like a final sentence. Evelyn froze, her expression hardening, but I could see something flicker in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or fear. Chase jumped in, desperate. "You think anyone will believe you? You've always been the dramatic one. You'll just embarrass yourself again." I tilted my head slightly. "You're forgetting something," I said. "I don't need them to believe me. I have proof. That's all that matters." I picked up the folder, slid it under my arm, and walked out of that house for the last time. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Evelyn's voice, low and panicked, arguing with Chase. I didn't stop to listen. For once, their chaos wasn't my problem. The next few days were quiet but heavy. My lawyer filed everything, the lawsuit, the supporting evidence, the fraud report. It was official. Evelyn and Chase would have to answer for what they'd done. When the legal notices were delivered, I didn't call them. I didn't gloat. I just sat in my small apartment and let out a deep breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. It wasn't revenge I felt, it was release. Word spread faster than I expected. The same people who had attended my mother's grand birthday party, the same guests who had witnessed her slap me, started whispering. At first quietly, then openly. I heard that at the country club, people had started asking questions. "Did you hear about Evelyn and Chase? Apparently, they're being sued. Something about stolen money. They had built their whole reputation on being respectable, generous, admired. Now, those same social circles were turning cold. Invitations stopped coming. People avoided eye contact. No one wanted to be linked to a fraud scandal. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my peace. I met with my lawyer regularly, stayed in touch with Uncle Martin, and followed every legal step carefully. I wasn't looking for sympathy or attention, just justice. One night, as I sat on my couch reviewing documents, I realized something important. For so long, I had tried to earn their love, their approval, their respect. But now, I didn't need any of it. I didn't need to belong to people who had never truly seen my worth. What they had stolen could be replaced. What they had broken, I could rebuild. But the strength I had found in myself, that was something they could never take again. The story spread through town faster than anyone expected. Everyone who had been at that birthday party remembered the moment Evelyn slapped me, and now they whispered about what came after. The once proud Thompson family was no longer admired. They were the subject of quiet gossip and pity. The country club that Evelyn loved so much began to keep its distance. Friends she had known for years suddenly became too busy to return her calls. The lawsuit moved forward, and the truth became impossible to hide. The accountant, who had once managed my father's estate, testified that Evelyn had forged documents and signatures. Every detail lined up: the fake transfers, the changed beneficiary forms, the years of hidden withdrawals. There was no way around it. The evidence spoke for itself. Chase tried to play innocent, claiming he had no idea where the money came from, but the paper trail showed otherwise. He had signed documents, approved transactions, even used my share of the trust to make down payments on his condo and luxury car. When his employer, a local real estate firm, found out, they quietly let him go. The reason was listed as ethical concerns. Evelyn, on the other hand, tried to regain control. She called me late one night, her voice trembling. "Mia, please," she said. "We don't need to do this in court. We're family. Families shouldn't fight like this. We can talk about it, work something out." For a moment, I almost felt that old pull, the one that made me want to keep the peace. But then I remembered standing in that ballroom with everyone watching as she slapped me. I remembered Chase clapping, and the years I'd spent believing I didn't deserve fairness. So I said quietly, "You should have thought about that before you stole from me." Then I ended the call. Months passed as the case made its way through the system. My lawyer kept me updated on every step. I showed up to every hearing, every meeting, calm and collected. Evelyn and Chase tried every trick, claiming misunderstanding, filing delays, begging for leniency. But the evidence was too strong, and the judge wasn't fooled. When the final ruling came, it was like the closing of a long, painful chapter. The court ordered Evelyn and Chase to repay the entire amount of my inheritance, every cent of the $450,000, plus additional damages for fraud and emotional distress. Their accounts were frozen, their assets under review. Chase lost everything first. His car was repossessed, his condo foreclosed. Evelyn had to sell parts of her property just to begin paying what she owed. The woman who had once bragged about her perfect life now avoided everyone. I didn't celebrate, not really. I didn't feel triumphant or vengeful. What I felt was peace, a deep, quiet peace that had been missing for years. The same people who had seen me humiliated now saw me walk away with dignity. They finally understood that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's the calm before justice. When the dust settled, I didn't look back. I moved forward, carrying with me the lesson that sometimes standing up for yourself means walking away completely. I had lost a family, yes, but in return, I had found myself. It was a bright, calm morning when I stood outside my new home. The air was cool, the neighborhood quiet, the sky wide and open. The house wasn't grand or fancy, but it was mine, bought with my restored inheritance and a sense of peace I had never known before. I looked at it for a long time, not with pride, but with relief. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The months since the case had ended were quiet ones. I left Oregon for a smaller town a few hours away, where nobody knew my name or my story. I started my own small event planning business again, this time on my terms. I chose my clients carefully, surrounded myself with calm people, and rebuilt my confidence piece by piece. Sometimes at night, I would think back to that evening at the country club. The shock on everyone's faces, Chase's cruel laughter, my mother's cold eyes. But the memory didn't sting the way it used to. It was just a reminder of how far I had come. I had walked through humiliation, betrayal, and loneliness, and come out stronger. One afternoon, as I was sorting mail at my kitchen table, I saw an envelope with my mother's handwriting on it. I froze for a moment, unsure whether to open it or throw it away. In the end, I opened it. The letter started with shaky handwriting. "Mia, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this." She wrote about how she had made mistakes, how she was under stress after my father's death, and how Chase had influenced some of her choices. She apologized, not deeply, but enough to show she was trying. Then came the excuses, the justifications, the memories twisted into something that sounded softer than they were. I read the letter once, all the way through. When I finished, I sat quietly for a long time. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, and closed it. I didn't feel anger or satisfaction, just closure. There was no need to reply, no need to forgive or fight. Some things didn't need to be fixed, they just needed to end. That slap she gave me in front of everyone, the one meant to break me, to put me in my place, had done something very different. It had woken me up. It had shattered years of guilt, silence, and manipulation that had ruled my family for generations. And that one quiet call, the call I made to Uncle Martin, became the turning point of everything. It turned silence into power. I walked outside again and looked at the sunset spreading across the sky. It wasn't dramatic or bright, just warm and steady, like peace. I wasn't the broken daughter anymore. I wasn't the family's shadow or the forgotten one. I was simply Mia, standing on my own, with nothing left to prove and everything ahead of me.